So spring is around the corner, which means spring cleaning is inevitably on our minds. And with that comes decluttering. But decluttering can actually be a lot harder than we think, especially when we get into some dialogue like, oh, this is sentimental, this is just in case, or I spent so much money on this. It can start to become a lot more difficult to get the results we want when we're decluttering. And for me, what I've noticed, what it really boils down to in the end is mindset. So in today's video, I want to share with you 10 mindsets to help you declutter more effectively. For those of you who don't know me, welcome. My name is Christina. I talk all about intentional living, intentional spending, and how to get the most out of what you've already got. If any of that sounds interesting to you, then please give this video a thumbs up. It's the greatest way you can help support me. And if you want to see more videos like that, then please subscribe. The first mindset to get yourself into when you're planning on doing a declutter, especially a big one like spring cleaning, is to focus on what stays rather than what should go. Sometimes I find with decluttering, it can actually really turn into a negative experience because you can start to get really embarrassed or upset with yourself with all the things you discover that you completely forgot about. Like, have you ever said to yourself, oh my God, I can't believe I bought this, or what was I thinking, or that was dumb? I think the self-talk can really go there, and it can also really start to shift you into sort of forcing yourself to get rid of things because you think you should. Now, don't get me wrong, some things really do need to go, like that last bridesmaid's dress.
God, what the hell is that?
Theme wedding.
What was the theme? Humiliation?
But I think a more positive framework to approach a declutter from is to focus on what stays. If you know exactly what it is you want to keep, then I think it keeps it a lot more positive and in a mindset of abundance and gratitude rather than one of scarcity and even guilt. And what also happens when you focus on what you want to keep is that it becomes a lot easier to make that decision. Rather than sort of ruminating or rationalizing with yourself on whether or not something should stay or should go, you kind of say yes to yourself right away. And that way everything that's left over that's not in the keep pile is what you can put your energy towards after the fact when you know at that point exactly what it is that you want to stay. Number 2 is to think of your declutter as the process to create space for what you actually care about. Just like focusing your declutter from a perspective of what you want to keep, this sort of ties in as well because now you want to create space and a place for all the things that you've decided to hold on to. And since you decluttered from a perspective of what you want to keep, you know right away that these are the things that you actually care about. They're the things that you'll miss when you notice that they're gone. They're things that you use every day that provide value and function in your life, or you just plain really like them. But when you get rid of things that are in the way, you do inevitably create space for the things that you care about, that are important to you, and that you actually want to keep. Number 3 is to remind yourself that clutter simply makes life more difficult. I know the saying of a cluttered space is a cluttered mind does sound cliche by this point. I think we've all heard it so many times, but it is ultimately true. Clutter inevitably shifts the focus away from what we actually care about. It makes getting dressed a lot harder because you have too many choices, you don't even know what you have. You feel like you have a closet full of clothes and nothing to wear. It makes working a lot harder because your desk is messy, you don't know where anything is, you can't focus. And it can even make things like cleaning and tidying more difficult because there's just more stuff that you have to deal with. Things take longer, they become more frustrating, or you might not even want to do them at all because there's just too many things and steps in the way of you completing the task. So as you're going through your declutter, if you tell yourself that I'm making things easier for myself by letting this thing go, then that way I think you can really start to see the benefits that you'll be gaining when you do get rid of it. Number 4 is to think of decluttering as a process of curation. You're not decluttering, you're curating. This can be in your home, your life, your work, or your wardrobe. But what do you think of when you think of curation? We think of museums, we think of beautifully laid out boutiques. Everything is highly edited, clean, accessible, and very calm. And that's the way I like to frame what my end result is gonna be when I do decide to declutter. And it's really hard for something to look curated, intentional, and with purpose if there's just way too much stuff in the way. Sometimes the words that we choose really matters. So if decluttering for you feels a little bit stressful, intimidating, try telling yourself that you're curating your space instead. Next is to set in systems and habits that work for you on repeat. As much as I love a good power declutter or a spring clean, maintaining the results of that declutter takes a little bit of work. So now that you've gone through your declutter or your curation, you know exactly what it is you want to keep. Now it's important to think of systems and habits that you can implement to maintain that result. Because life simply just gets messy. So the systems and habits that I think can be helpful here are things that you can implement to make your tidying and the result of your declutter really easy to achieve that new baseline. This to me is essentially a tidying reset. So now that I've done my declutter and I know exactly what it is I want to keep, this also means that I have a place for everything, and I set habits and little rules in place to make sure that that thing ends up back in its place. So this can be systems like opening up paper mail right away instead of letting it pile up, taking your shoes off and putting them where they're supposed to go as soon as you get home, or making sure the dishwasher is running before you go to bed. Essentially, it's just little habits that you can implement to make things easier to maintain the result of your declutter for longer. The money is long gone. This is something that I have to remind myself even up to this day when I declutter, because it's expensive. And if you're anything like me, then you may have had a tendency to hoard nicer or expensive things in the past. But the one thing I want to remind all of us is that the money is long gone and you're not getting it back by it sitting in the back of your closet, forgotten with the tag still on. I think a lot of the reason why many of us struggle with decluttering is simply because we're adverse to loss. For me, it's been embarrassing to come to terms with the fact that I've spent hundreds to thousands of dollars on things that I just never ended up wearing, even though I convinced myself repeatedly that I would. But the flip side to that is that I am definitely not making any of my money back by it sitting unused in my wardrobe. So at the very least, consider it a learning experience and a mistake to try not to repeat again in the future. And at the very best, you can potentially sell it. And of course, there is the risk of you not even making a fraction of what that item cost. But at the very least, you can get a little bit of your money back and consider it a lesson learned. Number 7 is to remind ourselves that managing the inflow of stuff is just as important as managing the outflow, if not more important. I'm sure we've all done a bunch of declutters in the past, only to end up right back where we started because we ended up filling the space back up. And that's because with decluttering, the focus is a lot on what goes out, but part of a decluttering process is to also focus on what comes in. This is where you can implement things like the one in, one out rule, or simply just ensuring that the next thing you choose to buy is a thoughtful and intentional purchase. But it's important to consider what is coming in just as much as we think about what goes out. The next thing to consider, especially if you're having a lot of trouble getting rid of things, is that it could be another way anxiety is manifesting. Decluttering can be quite an emotional process, especially in the context of which we declutter. Sometimes we have to clean out homes of relatives who are no longer with us, or we simply could just be facing years and years of emotional baggage that's manifested in our things. For example, for me, I was an emotional spender and shopaholic, so a lot of my clutter manifested in my wardrobe and in my makeup drawer. And when I decluttered for the first time, it was really hard to let go of a lot of these things, and I was faced with a lot of my mistakes and all of the money wasted in my face all at once. And seeing that for some can be highly motivating, while for others, it can be really difficult to let go of these things and cause a lot of anxiety. For me, what I recognized from that was that I needed to do a lot of inner work when it came to my relationship with my stuff and myself. And I really had to think about why I was feeling anxious, why I was fearful of letting go of certain things, why everything was suddenly a just-in-case item. And I was able to recognize within myself, at least, that this was all just my anxiety and fear manifesting, and my fear of letting go. If you notice that this fear comes up quite often when you declutter, then I think going back to some of the other mindsets that I talked about in this video can be helpful. But the other thing that I had to do myself was seek professional therapy. Because although decluttering can have a lot of really great results, from a mental health perspective, it creates a lot of calm, you feel very proud and accomplished with yourself. But if you're recognizing a lot of fear within your declutters, then I would take notice of that, journal it out, and even seek the advice of a therapist to help work on what those inner fears are so that we can start to detach ourselves from the things that we own. Which brings me into mindset number 9, and it's that my stuff is not me. For many of us, this is a really difficult mindset because Our stuff can really tell a story about ourselves. For example, I really do believe that personal style, home decor are all ways that we can sort of express ourselves and who we are and what we enjoy without having to say anything. I think there is a ton of validity to that, and I think can be very helpful and joyful in many cases. But when it's time to let something go, I don't think it means that you need to necessarily let go of a part of yourself. Of course, you can say goodbye to a certain era that you were in. Like my infinity scarf era, I'm happy to have said goodbye to. So with that, I'm perhaps decluttering something that I was interested in at the time or a phase that I was in. But what I'm not letting go of with that thing is my own self-worth and who I am or any of my value. I used to hold on to a lot of things because I would tell myself that, oh, if I hold on to this jacket, then I'm gonna look more professional and therefore I'll be more successful and a better person. Or if I hold on to this record collection, people aren't gonna think I'm cool and quirky and eclectic anymore. So that's what I'm getting at when I am talking about detaching ourselves from the things. Things can certainly help tell a story or shape a narrative around how we want to be perceived. But at the end of the day, you are still you with or without all of that stuff. And letting go of those things is not going to diminish any of that. And number 10 is to ensure that you're approaching your declutter from a perspective of abundance and of gratitude, rather than one of scarcity and deprivation. A lot of this sort of ties back into the fear of letting go, the fear of losing yourself, the fear of losing a memory when you do decide to get rid of something. But I think instead it's a lot more helpful to focus on what you're gaining out of that declutter. You can even go so far as to thank the thing that you're letting go of as you declutter it. It served its purpose in the era that it needed to. Now it no longer does, so you can thank it and let it go. You can certainly be grateful for what that thing did for you when you needed it, and you can also be grateful for the result that you're going to have at the end. Look at all these things that I gave away to create space for all these beautiful things that I'm still enjoying and still using and that make me happy. As with many things in life, it can really boil down to having an attitude of gratitude. Being grateful for what you want to keep and being grateful for what you let go of. And I think when we approach declutters from that mindset, it can make letting go a whole lot easier. And even something that you're happy to do. So those are some of the mindsets that you can consider thinking about next time you're planning on decluttering. I think a lot of these mindsets can help frame decluttering from a positive perspective to gain a positive result, rather than one of missing out or losing out on the things that we're deciding to get rid of. And I think it can help you get the results you want, potentially even faster. Let me know some mindsets that you think about when you decide to declutter. Leave me a comment down below. And if you found some value at any point in this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. It is the best way you can help support my channel. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. See you in the next one, guys. Bye.